Welcome back as we continue to work our way through the pages of the story of Jesus as told by Matthew the apostle, the former tax collector to whom Jesus called to follow him and he left his trade behind. Matthew chapter 28, one verse 10. I will be reading out of the New King James Version of the Bible. Verse 10 says this. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." There have been attempts over the centuries to reconcile all the resurrection appearances of Jesus. There have been attempts to figure out how the various appearances fit together into a larger narrative. And there have been attempts to figure out who was present where. So, for example, we've made the point that it seems very likely that there were more than just the two Marys mentioned in Matthew at the tomb that day. There is a sense in which we have tried to figure out the bigger picture of what transpired with that on that day. The problem, of course, with this is that the gospel writers were condensing materials. They were not only just condensing material, they were trying to create a readable narrative. And understand that enters into play because it's easy enough if you just list facts. But if you're trying to make it so that people can actually read something, well, that means you have to shave things, squeeze things, conform things. And so the narrative, as it were, impacts the truth, the material, which is not to say they're making up things, it's just saying they're trying to make the story readable. The problem when you try to create a larger chronology is that you cannot always be certain how the writers condense material. And I think as you go through Matthew chapter 28, you begin to see where these forces are at work, the condensing of material and the need to create a credible narrative. Matthew obviously knew a lot more than he gave. Matthew just chose to give what he felt important. The Christian, like these women, have encountered the resurrected Jesus. When we go forth and tell our story, do we tell all the details? Well, we could, and that would be accurate, but would it be effective? The answer is no. When we tell our story of our encounter with the resurrected Jesus, we can learn from what the gospel writers did. They were not fudging the truth or leaving out inconvenient truths. They retold the story of the resurrection of Jesus to serve a larger purpose, to serve a purpose. You see, they knew they could not tell everything, and they were comfortable with the fact that they did not need to tell everything. They were able to tell what they needed to fit their purpose and left it at that. When you have opportunity to share what the resurrected Jesus has done for you, do not feel the need to tell everything. And obviously, there are times when you talk to people of the faith, you can tell more or less, depending on the circumstances and situation. Notice once again, the women are told not to be afraid. Second time. This time it is Jesus who says this and not an angel. And I kind of would conjecture here that Jesus telling them to not be afraid is probably a bit more effective than the angel, especially by this point in the narrative. Now, here again, how much time unfolds? We're not told. But we read this and it's kind of like boom, 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 things happen. Were there several minutes between the angel and Jesus? And if that is the case, then by then the women are maybe beginning to, as it were, settle down a bit. The initial shock of things is past. Jesus appears and now tells them to be not afraid. Now, again, we've talked about this. Scripture, in a sense, is one dimensional at times. Did Jesus just go, Do not be afraid. I mean, what was it in his voice that the women heard? And how much were the words actually important? Let's use a simple illustration. If you've ever had children, once in a while they can have nightmares. Well, they scream in the middle of the night, and so you scream back at them, be quiet, go back to sleep. That's probably not going to be all that effective. What you need to do is go into the room and say, hey, it's okay, I'm here. Be quiet. Do not be afraid. Now, what does it for the child? It's probably not going to be the words. It's the fact that you are present and just they know that you are present, that their parent is there. They have comfort in that. And so, what I'm saying to you is when Jesus shows up and says, do not be afraid, I don't think they really heard the words as much as they knew that Jesus was here. The resurrection was real and true. They had comfort in that. We as Christians must spend time with Jesus. For like that little child, we, like those women, need to learn to hear the voice of Jesus so that Jesus can bring us the comfort that we need at times, where Jesus can say, do not be afraid. These women went to the disciples to tell what had happened. There are places in the gospel where the text does not do justice to what happened originally. This is one of those places. Would it not have been wonderful to be there? The immense weight of what had transpired Good Friday were off their shoulders. The life of the Christian in some ways is no different than the non-believer. I mean by that there is much we endure in common because that is the nature of life. The difference is that the Christian knows the purpose and meaning of life. Now, as you walk in faith through life, you begin to know and understand how God can carry you through all the crises of life. It does not make them easy, but you have a resource to help you through them. These women had endured a major crisis in their life. They would be that much stronger in the next one. There is resilience in faith that comes from not so much knowing as much as having experienced his ability to take you through those dark days. Now, we have no records, but can you imagine these women going forth after this in their communities, how they would have been powerful of faith and commitment because they knew the reality of Jesus, and people who interacted with them daily would be aware that Jesus was truly real to these people. Yes, dark days come, but joy comes also because he has been raised from the dead.